Hello, everyone, and welcome to TBR's Future Friday, TBR 2015 Predictions, a series of thought leadership webinars being held each Friday between January 16th and February 13th, 2015. Each Friday, TBR's research teams will share predictions for 2015 and beyond across the hardware, software, cloud, security, devices, professional services, telecom, and digital markets. Top TBR analysts will address the trends, drivers, and the business outcomes they predict will occur throughout the year. The Future Friday webinar series stakes out the status, changes, and the key market directions we see happening in the next few years. Before we start, there are a few housekeeping items I'd like to cover. First, we will be recording today's session and posting it on our YouTube site, TBRI channel. We encourage you to visit our channel to watch this presentation or any of the others we've posted. Second, we'd like to hear your opinions and thoughts on the material we're presenting. Please send any questions or comments through the Q&A or chat function. The presenters will address them at the end of the session. Or if you'd like to set up a client inquiry for more detailed discussion, please reach out directly to our presenters at the end of the webinar to set up that call. Third, we will send out the slides to everyone registered for today's webcast within 24 hours of the conclusion of the webinar. You can find the slides as well as our thought leadership pieces, other webinars, and commentaries on our SlideShare site, and I will include the URL in the comment box as we proceed. My name is Stuart Williams. I'm the Vice President of Research at Technology Business Research. Leading our presentation today is Alan Krantz, the Practice Manager and Principal Analyst for our Cloud Group, Matthew Healy, Principal Analyst here at Technology Business Research, and Jillian Morandi, our Senior Analyst in our Cloud Practice. In the Future Friday webinar series, TBR research teams provide business analysis on established trends that will continue in 2015, new trends, and long-term predictions for the field. Cloud stands at a tipping point between the broad horizontal public platforms that drive the market and the fragmented private and hybrid capabilities that will form its future. The market is shifting to provide services that are customizable for the individual end customer, whether adding security, performance, features, or management. These shifts will have implications for competitors across public, private, and hybrid clouds and the associated services in 2015 and beyond. Considering this, TBR developed predictions for 2015 and beyond. These three types of trends are trends that will continue into 2015, meaning current trends that we expect will continue or accelerate in the coming year. New trends for 2015, these are maturing trends from 2014 that TBR believes will expand in 2015. And longer-term trends that are opportunities TBR believes will begin in 2015 but will not have a full effect on the industry for several years. Now that I've set the stage, let me hand the call off to Alan.
Great. Thanks, Stuart, and thanks for everybody for joining today's webinar. Now, before I hand it off to Matt to go through the first set of predictions, I wanted to set a little overall context for why we think cloud is going to become even more interesting and complex going into 2015 and beyond. What we see is this transition really, again, driven by customers, just like the overall cloud adoption has been, but one that looks for additional applicability for cloud, whether it's enhancing security, having a local partner to help you manage and implement that. Those are all things that, given the state of the market, are going to be more common going forward than they have been in the past. And so the outcome, once we get there, will be to look at what the impact is for the existing leaders in the market. We believe that competition is going to be continually increasing in 2015 and 2016 as the capabilities and the requirements become much more complex for using cloud in new customers and use cases than it has been. So that's really the overall context for the prediction and the changes that we see coming in the future. So I have Matt Healy and Jillian Morandi. We'll trade off and jump in throughout as we go through the next 6 predictions. with that, I'll hand it off to Matt to lead us into the first continuing prediction.
All right, excellent. And this is the first of the continuing predictions. And I'd like to ask that anybody who's on here was also on last Friday's software webinar understand that my predictions about technology are a little bit better than the last prediction I gave a week ago Friday, which was Seattle 21, New England 10. That didn't work out too well for me. But hopefully my technology-based predictions are a little bit more solid than my Super Bowl predictions. So let's jump into the first one. Private cloud, we think, is really going to start driving adoption and spending growth, and we think it's going to be particularly interesting as the data we've taken for the larger size companies. So 250 to 500 million tends to be about the break point where these companies get more interested in private cloud. I am absolutely not saying that large enterprises are not interested in public cloud. I'm saying that in addition to public cloud, they are very interested in private cloud. The reason for their interest in private cloud is they are very large organizations that are looking for a certain degree of customization that may not necessarily be offered as easily in public cloud. So they have security requirements, they have process requirements, they have operations requirements that smaller enterprises may not have, and they're willing to pay for them. So for the very large enterprise customers, what you see is an attempt to maximize value, and the way they would maximize value is, here's our list of requirements, now how can I get this as cheaply as possible? And that tends to, in a lot of cases, lead to private cloud. A mid-market company below that, we think, has a little bit more interest in public cloud because their quest for value is, here's my budget, how much features can I get? And sometimes public cloud tends to be a little bit more budget conscious. So we really think that we're going to see a lot more investment in private cloud, and especially on the very large enterprise. But anyone listening to this, do not walk away from this that says, ooh, cool, all I have to do is sell large enterprise private cloud and SMB public cloud and I'll win. No. Focus a little bit more attention on private for large enterprise and a little bit more attention on public for small business, and you'll be in better shape because you'll match up with what those markets, where we see those markets going. Alan, do you have anything you want to add, or should we move to the next prediction?
I mean, I think the other thing to add is, and the graph bears it out, is, you know, so far large enterprise has been the predominant investor in private cloud to date for current levels of adoption. But if you look at the evaluation, the consideration, this is not something that's going to be solely contained to the large enterprise. It's going to take them longer. Yep. The solutions will be perhaps delivered by a local service provider, a different party than, you know, the IBMs or the big data center providers. But I think that the interest across the board is there. It's been large enterprise that's led and kind of established at the high end the market for these capabilities, but kind of universally applicable in terms of the levels of interest.
Yeah, and that was why I kept stressing, do not assume that this means large enterprise equals private, SMB equals public. Large enterprise right now has equaled a little bit more private, and we think it will stay that way. SMB has indicated a little bit more public, and we think it will stay that way. But we're not looking at, you know, a 95-5 split here. We're looking more at like 60-40, 65-35 kind of in terms of preference here. So very important to note that, and thanks for calling that out.
And the other thing while we're here, I saw a question come in around the deployment method for private cloud. And so to date, we've seen, even though it's led by large enterprise, that there's still a lot of, and I think it speaks to the depth of the adoption, that a lot of it is through these hosted environments where there's not that upfront expense to build the data center or to restructure the data center to have a cloud environment. But we're starting to see that shift in terms of more customers after those initial experiences make bigger investments because of the initial deployments, the level of cost savings and flexibility that they believe will be provided. So I think it's beginning to transition more to an on-prem model, but it's been driven by some of the early hosted.
Quick question came in from the participants. Can you define private cloud, Alan? The question is local, remote, hosted, managed. I know we have a fairly expansive definition for private cloud. Maybe you can fill folks in on that.
Sure. So our definition for private cloud includes both on-prem as well as the hosted model, but we are looking at a single tenant dedicated set of infrastructure that's run for that client. So it's not a multi-tenant solution as in public cloud. It's a dedicated physical infrastructure for a single client is the thing that defines it, whether that's in the client's data center, whether they're managing it or whether it's someone else managing it, or whether it's down the street in a third-party provider's data center.
Yeah, and in terms of which direction the large enterprise is going to go, whether or not it's in my data center that I'm going to migrate to a cloud versus somebody else's, in a variety of different conversations with some CIOs of some very large enterprises, it basically comes down to a case-by-case budgeting and financial decision. If they have the infrastructure and it's cheaper to do it in their data center, they're going to do it in their data center because that's a sunk cost, and I might as well at least continue to leverage everything that I already have. If I have to build something out and put a lot of CapEx into it, then maybe I'll go to somebody else's data center. So I think to sit there and say, is it going to be all in someone else's data center or all in somebody? No, there's the CIOs, I've been very impressed with just how sophisticated with the budgeting that some of the CIOs of these very large companies are. I guess I shouldn't be because you don't make it to that position unless you're quite sharp and clever. So you really, as a vendor trying to sell private cloud services, you got to know the territory. You have to know where you're selling into. So, all right, should we jump to the next one?
Sure.
Okay. Dovetailing with this prediction, we see prediction number 2 about application vendors continuing to offer as-a-service pricing as an option. Well, okay. This just in, giant newsflash, when all the customers want to migrate to a cloud environment, the vendors that don't offer as-a-service pricing are probably in trouble, and the vendors are generally pretty intelligent. So I don't feel too far out on a ledge or a limb on this one because we're already seeing companies go to as-a-service pricing offerings. We're seeing massive growth in public, massive growth in managed private. Traditional software licensing is declining. Well, that means that if you're SAP, if you're Oracle, if you're IBM, if you're Microsoft, you're going to start making all of your software available as a service. We've seen Oracle announce a program that allows you to convert maintenance to cloud. SAP introduced one of those a while back. So I just think that this is going to continue. I hate it if I was a little too snarky, but the market's moving this direction. Vendors have 2 choices. Move with the market, or tell me you're not going to, and I'll tell all my hedge fund friends to short your stock. But that is, so I don't think that we're out on a limb here on this one. It's a trend that's happening. It's going to continue to happen. If anything, it's going to accelerate in 2015.
Mm-hmm. And the other point on this is if you look at, in addition to the large software vendors, which are at different stages of their evolution, we're seeing a greater need as well as an opportunity for the thousands of other ISVs out there that target different niches or have their own focus with their licenses, that this is the opportunity for them to, just as the big vendors have struggled with this, they're going to go through their own struggles, and that providing guidance, technologies, platforms so that you can expand to meet this opportunity is in and of itself an opportunity for the larger infrastructure vendors, that just as you work with service providers in terms of transitioning to provide cloud services and hosting services, that for to really, this is what will cause a lot of the fragmentation of the solutions, is having your second and third tier ISVs transition to an as-a-service model is a huge opportunity for them. But there's a lot of barriers to getting there, and so there's an opportunity for the bigger providers to provide assistance and benefit in the same at the same time in terms of establishing their business and helping them make the transition and tap this growth, which may be there for them, but it's just a big change, both technology-wise as well as business-wise, in terms of how to restructure the licensing for the way that they're monetizing their IP, as well as run a data center business, which they're not accustomed to. And so that's one of the big dynamics, both from a customer standpoint, having more access to these solutions, but from a large technology platform standpoint, catering to this market of ISVs that is facing a big transition and challenge to move to an as-a-service model.
So we do have a question kind of relevant to this around the ISVs, saying what kinds of clients will reject SaaS and for what kinds of applications. So a little bit of a preview for my webinar next week, which is around the changes in the whole ICT industry. But essentially, one of the central ideas here is that the consumption models and where the source of innovation comes from, when you think about a workload and the way each individual business or enterprise is going to make a decision around, do they have their own innovation, their own differentiation? They're probably going to want to make, highly customize that application to fit their intellectual property and their processes. Whereas if it's a function or a workload that is non-differentiating for them and where they may need a lot less configuration, a lot less customization and more configuration, the SaaS model, particularly the public cloud SaaS model, is the one that's most appealing. And so that is kind of the key model that we see coming out in our CIO conversations.
Yeah, and so just, it's a really interesting and it's a really good question, from whoever put it in. But when you just look at, are they going to reject the SaaS model? I think you also want to go one step a little bit deeper than that. Are they going to reject the public cloud SaaS model because there may be some very strict regulations? So banks in Singapore aren't allowed to go to the cloud. Well, that doesn't mean they're not allowed to go to private cloud. It means they're not allowed to go to public cloud. So I think that you're going to continue to see people migrate to the cloud. The question is going to be, are they going to migrate the workloads to a public cloud environment where they can get what they want with just configuration, or do they have to migrate to a private cloud because of the degree of customization or the degree of importance of the workload? So abandoning, interesting, maybe deeper question, are you going one direction or the other? Because I think the tide is in that direction. It's just which channel will the water flow down, if you know what I mean. So I think we're going to turn it over to Alan, who's going to jump to our third prediction, because, boy, I got to tell you, you got to cut me off. I can talk about this for a real long time.
So the other, so we've talked a bit about the technology and the diversity of the offerings and the shift to a private cloud. One of the other fundamental business model changes we see coming around cloud is this transition from a very direct-to-vendor type relationship with little room for added value by partners or services to one that is really much more focused around multiple different parties providing assistance around the technology itself. And you can see here a slide from our cloud professional services study. And so with the large enterprises that we're focusing on there, you can see that the desire and requirement for services has really been there the whole time, that for the scale of changes and implementations that they're doing, they're not doing it themselves. They're looking for vendors to come in externally and provide help road mapping and rolling out the changes in technology that have been changing. And with this graph, you can start to see where we're seeing more of the focus. So really the consulting and the SI haven't gone away in terms of the need by customers, but in terms of the depth of the investment and the importance for customers in terms of the different areas of assistance that are being provided, we've seen this shift and seen it come up in a lot of the interviews and research work that we're doing, that it's no longer just about recommending and implementing the solution. With the scale and the complexity and the types of workloads that are being moved, particularly to these private and hybrid environments, a lot of customers are looking for help after the implementation to take care of the administration, the metering, the monitoring, the management for a growing diverse set of cloud services that, when they first started adopting cloud, it started off, one of the big benefits was to have a simplicity and agility, and as they've grown and matured their usage, a lot of just that overhead has really become a pain point for them. So for the large enterprises, the ability to come in and run and essentially do a cloud outsourcing type arrangement is something that's increasingly we're hearing from customers. And then also we did a study that looked at a growing market around a brokerage, where for the broader swath of customers below the large enterprise, having some platform-supported way to evaluate, to pilot, to meter and bill and simplify the administration around their different cloud services, again, is a value add that we're seeing more customers really coming around to as they've, something that started as very simple has become more complex. So they're looking for more services going forward around cloud than has been driven previously. So for the next prediction, I'll hand it off to Jill to take you through the private and community environments and how that impacts SaaS.
Thanks, Alan. The IT industry, they've been developing large, very deep horizontal apps for years. They have a very large install base, and then they begin to customize vertically. So lots of large apps, CRM, SCM, accounting and finance, and they've done this because it makes sense financially. You're not going to build one-by-one industry applications. So what has happened in the on-premise software industry is that ISVs and SIs have really developed a lot of the industry-focused solutions that are very tightly integrated with or built on top of software solutions. Now, the largest vendors that you see here, they have done a very good job expanding vertically themselves. SAP, Microsoft, Oracle, IBM, who will likely be on this list in a couple years as one of the largest SaaS vendors. They have huge industry practices. This includes R&D to develop new solutions, go-to-market, partners. They've done a good job, and they'll continue to do so in the SaaS world. Now, the cloud industry is following the same trend. There's the big CRM vendor, Salesforce. There's Workday and SuccessFactors in the HR space, O365 and Google Apps for productivity. And in the end of 2013 and 14, these vendors and the industry started to invest in vertical. So they've added tools, they've made acquisitions, they've added partners around specific industries, a lot in healthcare, finance, education. We're seeing more in retail, automotive. But this year, there's going to be something even new. And we've been hearing about the community cloud for a while. It's been kind of a buzzword. But we think in 2015 is when it's really going to start to take off. So it's different than an industry-focused cloud because it's more about the ecosystem. So the community clouds will use and be based on a single vendor. For example, SynCloud is Amazon and NASDAQ. But they'll combine SaaS vendors, infrastructure, and then a lot of ISVs building around these horizontals to get into very niche industries. Now, who's going to win in the community cloud space? It's hard to tell because it is still so new, and both traditional and cloud-first vendors have advantages. So for the traditional vendors, right now they're still focused more on the industry rather than community cloud. They have a lot of experience here. They have the channels. So they're taking something like SuccessFactors at SAP, populating industry-specific content, and putting that into their industry groups. Now, some of the cloud-first vendors, we think, have a bit of a leg up in the community cloud because they have such open platforms. They've attracted a lot of niche developers and niche ISVs to their platforms. And now they can build, the next step really is that community cloud, and I think Salesforce and Google and Amazon are doing a great job.
Oh, hold on, I think we lost the audio. You still on board? We're getting a couple of messages that folks have lost audio. Could you ping us in the chat function if you hear us? Okay. A lot of people don't hear us.
Okay, we're getting some response that everyone can really hear. So maybe
Great.
what had happened was, you know, one or two people lost. Based on that, we're just going to keep going.
Great, thank you all. Yeah, here's a question. Can you explain Community Cloud a bit more, and is there an example?
Sure. Yeah, so there's a financial services Community Cloud around, driven by NASDAQ. There's probably the most distinct examples have been the build-outs by AWS for the CIA and other government cloud centers that have cropped up around DC. So not maybe multi-tenant for or single-tenant, that doesn't really matter, but it's focused on a single industry. It's not broadly available to any customers. And we've also been seeing, you know, I think this is where an Internet of Things type approach comes in, where you look at partnerships, for instance, between, you know, technology providers and healthcare services companies to deliver cloud services. You know, Microsoft and GE is a good example of providing a platform that's targeted just at the healthcare industry. So all those are it could be either an application or just focused on infrastructure, but it's focused at a single industry and really builds in not just the security and performance for private cloud, but builds in features to meet certain regulatory requirements, as well as business model differences that vary across industries.
Another example that I've heard of is an SMB healthcare type of community cloud. So if I'm a small 5-person doctor's office or a niche healthcare provider, and I want to move to cloud, but I don't really have the IT staff, I can go to a community cloud marketplace and download compliant, secure, different applications that have been built that I already know meet all of my regulations, so I don't need to spend a ton of time researching or managing. I can kind of just go to it, get it, it works, and it just makes it a lot easier.
So the one of the questions that came in, and obviously in the data, is there's a large proportion of other suppliers in this space. So are those vendors? Are those true community-based suppliers? Are there other models for the way that those suppliers in those cases are operating?
Yeah, so I think it ties back to the ISV conversation that we had previously. If you look at the thousands of traditional ISVs that exist today, a certain number of them are going to be making a transition to cloud, and that they drive a significant portion of the revenue in these spaces. So that's going to be all of the gaps and vertical niches that, just as you know, Microsoft claims that for every $1 of revenue that they generate today, there's 8 out in the ecosystem. That it's going to be similar for the big application providers are going to capture a certain percentage of the market. They're going to provide platforms for a lot of different ISVs to come in and fill a lot of different niches around their platform, and that is going to be a significant opportunity in terms of the SaaS market going forward.
So it sounds like an evolution of both productization and the routes to market.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump in. Expect over the next 12 to 18 months a real lot of experimentation with all of the models that you mentioned there, whether or not it is a community-based, whether or not it is a channel partner who's specialized in a certain vertical or a certain region, an ISV who builds an application on top of an Azure or a HANA or something else, or an AWS that says, you know, and then effectively is reselling that. There's going to be a lot of experimentation here. Some are going to win, some are going to lose. If I knew which ones were going to win, I would buy the stocks in those. But I don't. I just know that it's going to be very fun and interesting to watch.
The next new trend in 2015, or this one's kind of a lack of a trend, but customers will continue experimenting with OpenStack, but it won't have the significant market impact until probably 2016, 17, 18. So while there's lots of OpenStack supporters, major vendors, HP, IBM, Cisco, VMware, Rackspace, and they are seeing traction, the technology has yet to be a primary decision driver, and right now it's more of a second-tier driver. Customers get the benefits, but they don't view it as ready for large-scale adoption or large-scale deployment. Now, the value proposition of OpenStack that I think the market understands is that it's a way to standardize on private and public cloud services, and it helps implement, it'll help manage, it'll remove a lot of barriers around integration and portability. But right now there are so many different versions of OpenStack, it hasn't really taken off. Now, there are a lot of success stories. HP Helion is growing in the market. IBM, I think Mirantis is probably seen the most success so far. And a lot of vendors have said that they will commit to OpenStack once it gains market share and once there's that core set of applications built around it. Even Google said, I think once it has around a 30% market share or more, they'll support it. So I think it is being commercialized now, and it will eventually be a top driver, but right now it's just more of a nice to have. And I think one of the reasons is because AWS and Google, they do open source a lot of their code. And while Amazon, you build right on the infrastructure, so there is indeed vendor lock-in. There's so many people that are experts in Amazon that can help build their business. A lot of the I would say 99% of the developers have used Amazon. So OpenStack just doesn't have that yet. If you're looking to build cloud applications, it's a lot easier to find an Amazon and Google expert than OpenStack. Now, another success story for an open source vendor would be Pivotal. So Pivotal has commercialized Cloud Foundry. It runs on Amazon or VMware, and I believe a few other infrastructures. But it took Pivotal to really come up with a commercial product, and I think IBM and HP and other vendors are doing that now. They just need to launch those core applications and get adoption in the market. So I think over 2015, we'll start to see that. So we'll start to see more centralized management, a core set of tools. A lot of the smaller projects, I think, will still be there, and that they'll still focus on more niche things, but those will probably be adopted a couple years down the road. And I think we'll see a lot of training of OpenStack experts and admins, so customers can start leveraging it.
So, Joe, would you say that this is a year that OpenStack really moves out of the lab, so to speak, and starts to move into the business?
Yeah, I think it still is much more of a technology than a product. It's not too customer-facing right now. So I think once it again becomes productized, a little simpler, people can look and feel and use it, it'll move into production more in 2016.
And I think in the meantime that the OpenStack compliance and support, I don't want to downplay the importance of that. I mean, I think when we look at customer evaluation of solutions that they're looking long-term at these and having that compliance and, long-term benefits is something that does, influence consideration today. It's not something that has a big monetary impact in the short term, but I don't want to downplay the importance of participating and building that into a strategy from a compliance standpoint. It's just not something that in and of itself we see as a big revenue driver for vendors coming in 2015.
And one last point I wanted to make. I think as enterprises, the largest of the large enterprises like GE start to, GE is a bad example, but if some of the big players that haven't gone fully into cloud yet, they are moving into cloud, I think that these vendors are going to be the ones that really take advantage of open source technologies, and especially OpenStack. As a big vendor that's been around for 100 years, that wants to be around for another 100 years, they're probably not going to tie all of their applications and all of their IT to a single vendor. So something like OpenStack that runs on so many different vendors, I think is huge for the enterprise, and I think, you know, as they look, that will be a driver for them.
Good. All right. And so to close with the longer-term trend, really there's a lot that we're encapsulating here. I think we've talked a lot about private cloud as we've gone through today's conversation, and when you look at the size of this, so this is the as-a-service market, so it's not the infrastructure for customers building their own, but you can see more growth, but still there's a big public cloud market out there. There's, in terms of proportions, that's not going to change, but we do see a lot of structural changes in terms of how these are going to be consumed, the routes to market. And so from a consumption standpoint, hybrid is obviously something that is increasingly being used by some set of customers, certainly top of mind with most others. And it's also something that is going to change the way that that public cloud revenue is being deployed and used within these organizations. That it's not all just about attacking the private cloud space. A lot of customers still find a strong role for public cloud solutions, but they're going to be doing it in a different way than they have in the past. Rather than having lines of business being able to consume applications or infrastructure on their own, a lot more of that is being redirected through IT, whether it's the kind of life cycle for difficulty with managing some of the services that have been deployed outside of the centralized role of IT previously, or the evaluation going forward for if you're going to be doing certain workloads, or if you're going to be doing campaigns that tie back to transactional systems that have a different set of requirements and regulations around them, that's not going to be something that you're going to see this shadow IT effect and you're going to be able to just consume on your own. So as you get into those much more mission-critical workloads, public cloud is going to have a place, but it needs to be managed and integrated and tied back to things that will never be a fit for public cloud. And so there's that change in terms of the technology, the use case, as well as going back to that management and services capability that we believe there's going to be more opportunity and more customers we've seen from our survey are open to outside assistance in terms of the customization, management, ongoing administration of these cloud services that without a partner play, without a managed service set of providers, the value that customers expect from these solutions now just isn't going to be there. So having a delivery chain with that's much more than just consuming directly from the cloud provider is important. So when we roll all of those things up in terms of how these services are going to be used, the requirement for support and services throughout, that there's, we believe, going to be a changing of the guard in terms of the growth leaders in cloud, and that those that can provide a hybrid platform that can be sold through IT, evaluated, meet all those requirements, and still tie back to business value, that is much more aligned with the value propositions for vendors that can deliver across those than those that have a single presence in public or on the private side. So while they're not going anywhere anytime soon, you're already seeing efforts on behalf of particularly Amazon to bridge that gap, to be able to tie into a traditional delivery or a private delivery and be able to deliver more of a solution rather than just focusing on directly selling on the public cloud side. So it's a struggle. We think there's going to be more complexity in terms of the competitive environment going forward than there has been. And that, but at the same time, you're going to see the existing leaders really, it's incumbent on them to evolve and change to be more than just a horizontal provider, either through partners or their own investments. Really adding to the value proposition for customers is going to be the most effective strategy going forward. And then the last layer that I'll hit upon are the barriers to exit. So with standards, with things like Docker, with migration specialists that can move applications from one cloud platform to another, that both for customers as well as ISVs, there's less lock-in, which is really what a lot of customers were trying to avoid with cloud, being more flexible. And just like anything, over time it grows, there's stickiness. But I think there's, again, customers advocating for some of these standards that don't tie them into a single platform and can enable more portability for their data and applications and services that, again, change the market, will really shift the balance, we think, towards providers that can deliver across the spectrum and tie it together on behalf of their customers. So with that, that's the close in terms of the predictions. There are a number of questions that came in, so we'll go through those.
Yeah, I think the first question, we'll tie it back to the most recent, to the previous slide. Does TBR foresee the ability for customers to selectively place workloads across multiple cloud providers, public and private, as something they will demand or simply a theoretical nice to have? So I think that implies a lot of rationality on the part of the buyers and complete knowledge of the pros and cons. So I think given the fact that there's such rapid evolution and the fact that people don't necessarily want to be moving workloads a lot, they want to find a nice an optimal place where they're getting the most efficiency, and then they'll make some step function changes. So I think that over time you're going to see people, for various reasons, for business model reasons, use multiple modes like HR compliance. You might have HR SaaS for remote offices or a different branch, whereas you may have HR internally for corporate functions. Elements like that. Finance may also be done for reasons of control in branch regions where it would be part of a centralized on-premise traditionally deployed application for the core corporate functions. Alan, any other additional thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point we don't see a lot of customers being that complex in terms of the workload decisions that are being made. I think one thing that you're going to see more in 2015 than you have is multiple different flavors of cloud delivered from a single provider, whether it's IBM or Microsoft with the Azure set of data centers from partners as well as their own. Cisco certainly has its eye on this as it builds out its own network of partners delivering cloud services. So I think that's the next stepping point, to be able to say some workloads that it can be a shared multi-client backend. It'll be more cost-effective, and you don't need the same performance and levels of security where other workloads can be on the private environment. So I think that's a stepping stone, but long-term, it could get there, but it's all about what's the net impact in terms of the benefit, balancing complexity versus the.
Yeah, and I want to break this. I want to break this a little differently, because if you're looking at the very large enterprises, you may see a desire to be on a standard platform, whether it becomes something like S/4HANA that was just introduced, or the Oracle 12c database, or IBM with SoftLayer, because you get a certain degree of control. At a very large enterprise, that would be valuable to them. But for a smaller or mid-sized business, you might start parsing workloads out a little bit differently. So whether or not it's a demand or a theoretical nice to have may be when you print out your corporate roster, does it print out on a couple pages or a couple reams of paper? And if it's a couple reams of paper, then you may want to start looking at some of these bigger platforms, and you'll run everything on that platform, and whether that platform is hosted internally, hosted on a private cloud, et cetera, not really sure that's going to matter that much. But, you know, if you're, say, TBR size with 85 people, we'll selectively put workloads in the cloud or on-prem, depending upon what's best at that point in time.
Yeah, and to expand on that a little, I think that this question provides a huge opportunity for the traditional vendors. So in the public cloud space, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, they have a lot of market share. And, you know, customers go to them, developers go to them, but what is happening is that developers and customers, they do realize that newer providers and new platforms make sense for certain workloads, but they're having trouble understanding which workloads should go to maybe an HP private cloud or maybe stay on-prem. So I think the vendors that market different workloads, HP or Dell, they've always been very vendor agnostic. So sure, put this workload on Amazon and Google, maybe we'll manage it for you, but X, Y, and Z workloads, you know, they would really work better on the HP private cloud environment for X, Y, Z reasons. I've heard developers asking for this. It's extremely hard to understand in the market, so I think as a go-to-market campaign, it provides a large opportunity.
Yep. And we have another question here. So it says, you know, so an increase in consulting services to figure this out. And if you tuned in to our professional services predictions webinar, you already heard this. If you didn't, I'll pass it along. Our group is really predicting a rise in the management consulting business, and because of the fact that businesses need business advice tied to the IT consulting in order to figure out the best way to align IT to their business processes, where their advantage may be in the marketplace, and then how to use those investments, because it's a big speed bump to move from one architecture to another. So they want to make sure that they're getting the best, the most bang, the most advantage for those dollars.
Yeah, and I think that you're going to see an increase, and the consultancies that I think are in the best position to take advantage of this are the ones that have very solid business consulting practices, but also very solid technology consulting practices. So when you start looking at, you know, kind of the high end in there, you start looking at people like Deloitte, EY, PwC, and IBM, and firms along those lines that really can marry the strategy with the technology. The Bain, McKinsey, BCGs of the world are also going to be, they're going to continue to exist on the very top layer, but they're going to need to partner with someone who can both bring the technology expertise into that, and then some of the lower-end technology system, primarily systems integrators, CSC, CAP, some of the Indian outsourcers, I think are going to be good on the technology side, but not necessarily should have the business side. That's why Deloitte, EY, PwC, guys like that.
Great, Matt. And with that, I'd like to thank the cloud team for their predictions, and thanks everyone for your questions and joining us. You can follow the team and TBR on Twitter at the handles listed here. You can give the folks here an email or a call as well. Before you sign off, we'd like to ask you to take a brief survey about today's webinar. As we research the performance of technology companies, we're also studying how we're helping our clients, and your feedback would be greatly appreciated. If you have a chance, we will be to review this document when we email it out to you. You can click on the links for YouTube and LinkedIn at the bottom here, so you can get to the recordings and other presentations by TBR. We'll leave the chat function open for another couple of minutes to give folks a chance to ask any last-minute questions, and we'll see you all very soon. Thank you very much.